Texas Hold'em is the most popular style of poker played throughout the world, and it's also the style that I've used in my feature film Cashing Out. I'm going to go over the basics with you so you can play your own home games with your friends or family, except, you know, minus the whole robbery part. The game is simple. Each player are dealt 2 cards face down. An additional 5 cards, also known as the board or community cards, are dealt after a series of betting rounds between each of the remaining players. The goal of the game is to win all the chips in the middle, also known as the pot, with the best 5-card hand between your 2 dealt cards and the 5 cards that are on the community board. Let's get into the specifics. First, the game requires at least 2 players to begin, with a maximum of 10 players at one table. You'll want to determine who the first dealer is. The most common way to do this is to pick one player to deal everybody a card face up in a clockwise fashion until somebody gets an ace. That person will then become the first dealer, or otherwise known as the button, to begin the first round of play. That person doesn't have to actually do the dealing of the cards, but like I said, they're going to be known as the first button. You will then want some sort of button chip or a trinket to keep track of whose button it is every turn. This just helps keep track of the rotation of the game. Once the dealer has been determined, we can go through the pre-flop process. The 2 people directly to the left of the dealer will then have to put in a predetermined size bet known as the blinds. The player immediately to the left will be known as the small blind, who has to put in a half-size bet, and then the player 2 seats over will be known as the big blind, who has to put in a full-size bet. So for example, if we're playing a $1, $2 game, the small blind would have to put in $1, where the big blind would have to put in 2. The reasoning for this is so that there's some sort of money already in the pot. Because let's be honest, poker would be extremely boring if everybody just folded all the time. Side note, if you're only playing with 2 players, which is also known as heads-up play, the dealer will act as a small blind, whereas the other player will always act as the big blind. Once the blinds are in place, the dealer will then begin dealing the cards out. That person will deal each player 1 card in a clockwise fashion until each player has 2 cards. These cards are known as your hand or the whole cards. From there, the person that's directly to the left of the big blind will be the first to act. They will have 3 options. They can either call the minimum bet, which in this case would be $2. The player can raise the minimum bet, which is at least 1 more bet, so in this case, $4, or they can fold their hand if they don't like their cards. This process continues until we get back to the big blind, which, if no bets have been raised, can just check. Checking means you don't have to put more money in and you don't want to fold your hand. What you're going to want to do will depend on your hand strength, but we'll get more into that later. Also, a side note, if a hand doesn't cost you any more money to play, even if you don't like it, you shouldn't fold. You never know what you're going to hit on the board, so even if you have a weak hand, there's no sense in folding. Now, once all betting has been complete, the dealer will then deal the flop. First, the dealer will have to deal out 1 card face down. This is known as a burn card, and it's to help prevent cheating. The dealer will then deal 3 cards face up. Once the flop has been dealt, the betting process will begin again with the remaining players, starting with the first person directly to the left of the dealer. They have 3 options. They can check, which they don't have to put more money in. They can bet, which they would have to put in at least the minimum bet set, so again, $2. Or they can fold, which, if you're the first person to act, doesn't make a ton of sense because you're not losing any money. Now let's go through an example. The first person to the left of the dealer bets $2. Now the second remaining player has a couple of options. 1, they can call the previous player's bet. 2, they can fold their hand if they think they're too weak. Or 3, they can raise that initial bet. If a player wants to raise, they have to minimally put in at least double what the initial bet was. A player could also re-raise with the same process. And also, side note too, if you're playing a game like No Limit Texas Hold'em, you can put all your chips in if you wish. Also, if a player bets or raises over you, now would be the time to fold a marginal hand. Once all the players have made their decisions, the dealer will then burn another card and deal out the next card, which is called the turn. Once the turn card is dealt, the players will then go through another round of betting, just as they did post-flop. Once that round of betting is complete, the dealer will then burn 1 more card and deal out the 5th community card, known as the river. Once the river card is dealt, the players will then go through 1 more round of betting. If there are any remaining players after the final round of betting, they will participate in a showdown. A showdown is exactly what it sounds like. The players will show their hopefully winning hand. If there was no betting in the last round, the player directly to the left of the dealer is first required to show their hand. However, if somebody bets or raises in the final round, the aggressor is required to show their hand first. Again, the player with the best 5-card hand between their 2 whole cards and the community cards will win the pot. Now, let's get into the different hand types. Cards in a standard deck are ranked by aces being the highest and twos being the lowest. The following are the different types of showdown hands in Texas Hold'em ranked from lowest to highest. First is the high card, which is the highest card on the board. Second is a pair, which is 2 matching card types on the board. Third is a 2 pair, which is 2 sets of matching card types on the board. Fourth is a 3 of a kind, which are 3 matching card types. Fifth is a straight, which is a sequentially connected non-matching set of suit cards, such as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also, note here, aces can be used on a board of ace 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10, jack, queen, king, ace. Sixth is a flush, which are 5 cards that are unconnecting, but they all have a matching suit. Seventh is a full house, which is a 3 of a kind with a pair. Eighth is a 4 of a kind, which is 4 matching cards. Ninth is a straight flush, which is a straight with matching suits. And then 10th, a royal flush, which is the highest straight flush in the game. Whichever player has the highest showdown ranking hand will win the pot. However, if 2 players hold the same ranking hand, they're required to split the pot evenly. As a reminder, the showdown is the 5 best cards, which sometimes could just be the 5 cards that are on the board. In most cases, if that happens, the players will have to split the pot evenly. Now let's get into some basic strategy of the game. What I'm about to teach you is just the very basic of basics to get you through any home game with your friends or family. Poker is a very complex game that takes a lot of skill and practice to master. It's best for newbie players to play cards of high value. High cards, high suited connectors, and high pairs are generally your best bet with a lot of players. The 10 best starting hands in Texas Hold'em go as follows: aces, kings, queens, ace king, suited or unsuited, jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, and ace queen, preferably suited. While these are definitely the best 10 hands to start with, eventually as you become more skilled, you want to widen your range of hands. This keeps you from becoming too predictable in your play. Also something to note, these are the best 10 hands to start with in poker, which also means they're the most uncommon. If you wait around too long for these hands, you're going to end up losing a lot of your chips. As long as you don't play too many marginal hands, you're going to be in really good shape. And finally, let's get into some table etiquette. It's best to practice good table etiquette because it can greatly affect the outcome of the game. Here's some of the top things that you absolutely shouldn't do when you're playing poker. 1. Do not act out of turn. Even if you absolutely do not love your hand and you plan on folding it, it's best to wait until it's your turn to act. Acting out of turn gives other players an advantage because you're giving them information they wouldn't normally get. This is something that's highly frowned upon. 2. Betting etiquette. When you're placing a bet in poker, you need to place all the chips you plan on betting inside of the pot at one time. You cannot put a stack of chips inside of the pot and then proceed with putting another stack of chips directly afterwards. This is an illegal move and you will only be able to put in one set of chips at a time, and it just kind of makes you look silly. 3. Splashing the pot. Splashing the pot means throwing your chips sloppily into the pot. When you bet or raise and splash your chips into the pot and mix them in with the others, that makes it extremely difficult for the other players to know what you bet or raise. Just don't do that. And last, and probably the most frowned upon, slow rolling. This is when a player will make the opposing player think that they won the hand and then reveal that they actually have the winning hand. I promise if you do this that nobody will ever want to play with you. And it just kind of makes you look like a d***. So that's all the basics of playing Texas Hold'em. Hopefully this gives you an understanding and will give you some confidence to actually play at a table. This is definitely a fun game. If you want to do this as a hobby, definitely keep it light and enjoyable. There's no reason to take it too seriously. It's definitely something that I thoroughly enjoy. Clearly, because I censored a whole movie around the game. Be sure to check out Cashing Out. You can check out all the ways to watch at the website www.cashingoutfilm.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the table.